I never thought I'd be writing this post, but after everything that's happened over the past 18 months, I need to get this off my chest. Maybe some of you have been through something similar. Maybe you'll think I went too far. I honestly don't care anymore. I just need to tell someone what my family did to me and how I finally got my revenge. My name's not important, but for the sake of this story, let's call me Jake. I'm 32, live in Portland, and up until last year, I thought I had a pretty decent family. Sure, we had our issues like everyone else, but I never imagined they were capable of what they did. Here's the background. I'm the middle child of 3. My older sister Madison is 36, married to this guy Trevor, who works in finance. My younger brother Ethan is 28, still living with our parents despite having a decent job in tech. Our parents, Robert and Patricia, are both in their early 60s. Dad owned a successful construction company before he retired, and Mom worked as a real estate agent for 30 years. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. Madison was the golden child who could do no wrong, and Ethan was the baby who got away with everything. I was just there. I worked my ass off, put myself through college with minimal help, started my own small architectural firm, got married to an amazing woman named Sarah, and built what I thought was a good life. The first sign something was wrong came about 2 years ago, right after my grandfather, Dad's father, passed away. Grandpa Joe had always been my favorite person in the world. He was a self-made millionaire who built his fortune through real estate investments, and he'd always told me that he appreciated my work ethic and independence. At his funeral, he'd left specific instructions that his will would be read exactly 1 month after his death. That's when things started getting weird. In the weeks leading up to the will reading, my family started acting strange. Madison, who usually only called me when she needed something, suddenly wanted to have weekly sibling dinners. Ethan, who'd barely spoken to me in years except to borrow money, kept showing up at my office unannounced to hang out. Mom and Dad invited Sarah and me over for Sunday dinners more frequently than they had in the entire 5 years of our marriage. At first, I thought maybe Grandpa's death had brought everyone closer together. Sarah even commented on how nice it was that my family was finally making an effort. I remember telling her, maybe it took losing Grandpa for everyone to realize what's important. God, I was so naive. The will reading was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon at Grandpa's attorney's office downtown. I took the afternoon off work, and Sarah came with me for support. When we arrived, the entire family was already there. Mom, Dad, Madison, Trevor, and Ethan, all sitting in the waiting room looking nervous. Madison kept checking her phone. Ethan was bouncing his leg up and down like he always did when he was anxious. Dad had his arm around Mom, who was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, though I noticed she wasn't actually crying. The attorney, a distinguished older man named Mr. Harrison, called us all into the conference room. He had this massive mahogany table, and Grandpa's will was sitting in the center in a leather folder that looked older than me. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Harrison said, adjusting his glasses. "Joseph made his wishes very clear, and I'm here to execute them exactly as he specified. Before I begin, I need to inform you that Joseph updated his will 6 months before his passing, and he was of completely sound mind when he did so." I saw Dad and Madison exchange a look. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Mr. Harrison opened the folder and began reading. The first few bequests were standard, some money to various charities Grandpa had supported, his vintage car collection to a museum, personal items to various friends. Then he got to the family portions. "To my daughter-in-law Patricia, I leave my gratitude for the years of service to my son, but nothing more, as she has made her priorities clear." Mom's face went white. "To my son Robert, I leave the lake house in Washington, with the condition that it never be sold and must remain in the family for at least 20 years. Should this condition be violated, ownership transfers immediately to my grandson Jake." Dad's jaw clenched. I could see the vein in his temple throbbing. "To my granddaughter Madison, I leave the sum of $50,000, to be used as she sees fit." Madison let out a breath she'd been holding, and Trevor squeezed her hand. 50 grand wasn't nothing, but knowing Grandpa's net worth was in the multiple millions, it seemed like a pretty modest inheritance. "To my grandson Ethan, I leave the sum of $50,000, with the hope that he will finally learn the value of earning his own way." Ethan's face flushed red, but he stayed quiet. Then Mr. Harrison looked directly at me. "To my grandson Jake, who has shown integrity, independence, and the strength of character I always hoped to instill in my family. I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes my investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $4.3 million, my property holdings in Oregon and California, estimated value $2.8 million, and my personal savings and assets, totaling $1.9 million. Jake has never asked me for anything, has built his own success, and represents the values I held most dear. I trust he will use these resources wisely and continue to make me proud. The room went dead silent. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Sarah, whose eyes were wide with shock. Nearly $9 million. Grandpa had left me almost everything. There's more, Mr. Harrison continued. Joseph included a letter to be read aloud at this time. He pulled out a handwritten note, and I recognized Grandpa's distinctive scrawl immediately. To my family, Mr. Harrison read, I know this will come as a surprise to some of you. For others, it will come as a disappointment. I've spent the last year of my life watching all of you carefully, and I've made my decision based on what I observed. Jake, you've made me proud every single day. The rest of you have shown me exactly who you are, and I've responded accordingly. Robert, I hope you learn that money cannot buy respect. Madison and Ethan, I hope you learn that entitlement is not inheritance. The tension in that room was suffocating. I could feel everyone's eyes burning into me, but I couldn't look away from Mr. Harrison's face as he continued reading. Patricia, you know what you did, and I will never forgive it. This is my final statement on the matter. To everyone in this room except Jake and his wife Sarah, understand that I gave you all numerous chances to prove yourselves worthy of my legacy. You all failed spectacularly. Jake, use this money to build the life you deserve. Don't let them manipulate you out of what is rightfully yours. Trust no one. With love and disappointment, Joseph. Mr. Harrison set down the letter and looked around the room. That concludes the reading of the will. Jake, I'll need you to stay behind so we can discuss the logistics of the estate transfer. The rest of you are free to go. Nobody moved. Then Dad exploded. This is bullshit, he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. That son of a bitch was senile. He didn't know what he was doing. Mr. Roberts, I can assure you that Joseph was fully competent when he drafted this will, Mr. Harrison said calmly. We had him evaluated by 2 independent physicians specifically to prevent any challenges on those grounds. I have their reports on file. There has to be something we can do, Madison said, her voice shaking. This isn't fair. We're his family too. Fair. I finally found my voice. You got $50,000 each. That's more than generous. Generous. Ethan stood up so fast his chair fell backward. You're getting $9 million, Jake. $9 million. And you think we should be grateful for scraps? Scraps. Sarah interjected. Most people don't inherit anything at all. You should be thankful for what you got. Stay out of this, Mom snapped at Sarah. This is family business. She-is family, I said, standing up beside my wife. More family than any of you have ever been to me. Trevor, who'd been silent until now, cleared his throat. Look, I think we all need to calm down and discuss this rationally. Maybe Jake would be willing to share some of the inheritance more equally. It's what families do, right, Jake? The way he said it made my skin crawl. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a demand wrapped in a thin veneer of reasonableness. I'm not discussing anything right now, I said firmly. Mr. Harrison, can we schedule a time to go over the estate details? Preferably somewhere private? Of course, he replied, already pulling out his calendar. How about tomorrow morning at 9? Perfect. Sarah and I will be there. I turned toward the door, but Dad stepped in front of me, blocking my path. You're not walking out of here without talking about this, he said, his face inches from mine. That money should be divided equally among all of us. It's what's right. What's right? I laughed bitterly. Grandpa made his choice. He knew exactly what he was doing. If you have a problem with it, take it up with him. Oh wait, you can't, because he's dead. Jake, please, Mom's voice cracked. Don't do this to us. We're your family. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. Don't you think we deserve something for all those years? Something in her tone made me pause. There was a desperation there that seemed off, almost rehearsed, like she'd been preparing this speech. You got the lake house, I pointed out to Dad. That's worth at least $800,000. And Mom, Grandpa specifically said you made your priorities clear. What did he mean by that? She looked away, and I saw Dad's hand tighten on her shoulder, not comforting, but warning. We'll discuss this at home, Dad said coldly. As a family, without the lawyers and the outsiders. He glanced at Sarah when he said outsiders, and I felt rage bubble up in my chest. Sarah is not an outsider, and we're not discussing anything. The will is final. Madison started crying. Those dramatic, theatrical sobs she'd perfected as a teenager whenever she wanted something. How can you be so heartless? Grandpa would be ashamed of you right now, Jake. This inheritance was supposed to help all of us, and you're just going to hoard it all for yourself? Grandpa literally wrote in his will that he was disappointed in all of you. I shot back. He wanted me to have it. Just me. We could contest this, Trevor said quietly. Undue influence. You obviously manipulated an old man into changing his will. Mr. Harrison stood up. Mr. Reynolds, I strongly advise against that course of action. Any contest will fail, and it will be expensive. Joseph took every precaution to ensure this will would stand up in court. We'll see about that, Trevor muttered, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He was a finance guy. He understood the legal realities better than anyone else in the room. Sarah grabbed my hand. We're leaving. Now. We pushed past Dad and walked out of the conference room. Behind us, I could hear Madison's sobs getting louder, Mom's voice rising in pitch, and Ethan shouting something about how I'd always been Dad's favorite despite everything. The drive home was surreal. Sarah kept glancing at me, waiting for me to say something, but I couldn't form words. $9 million. It didn't feel real. And my family's reaction, the instant hostility, the demands, the threats, it all felt wrong somehow. That was intense, Sarah finally said as we pulled into our driveway. I never expected them to react like that, I admitted. I mean, they got money too. Why are they so angry? Because they expected more. They probably thought they'd get equal shares, or at least a bigger piece. She turned to face me. Jake, your grandfather's letter said some pretty specific things. Patricia, you know what you did. What do you think that meant? I have no idea. Grandpa and Mom always seemed fine together. And the part about giving everyone chances to prove themselves? It sounds like he was testing them. Before I could respond, my phone started buzzing. Text messages were flooding in. Madison, how could you do this to us? Ethan, you're dead to me. I hope you know that. Mom, please call me. We need to talk about this as adults. Your father is very upset. Dad, you have 24 hours to agree to split this money fairly, or there will be consequences. I showed the messages to Sarah, and her face darkened. Consequences? Is he threatening you? I don't know. Maybe he's just upset and not thinking clearly. My phone rang. It was Madison. Against my better judgment, I answered. Jake, thank God, she said, her voice still thick with tears. Look, I'm sorry about how things went at the lawyer's office. We were all just shocked. Can we please talk about this? Maybe you, me, and Ethan could meet for coffee tomorrow and figure something out? Figure what out, Madison? The will is final. I know, but Trevor and I are in a really bad financial situation right now. We've got debts you don't know about, and that $50,000 barely covers half of what we owe. That's not my problem, Madison. You and Trevor make 6 figures combined. How did you even get into that much debt? She was quiet for a moment. It's complicated. Look, I'm not asking for millions. Just, maybe a few $100,000? Enough to get us back on our feet? You'd still have plenty left over. A few $100,000. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Madison, we haven't had a real conversation in 3 years. You've never invited Sarah and me to your house. You forgot my birthday for the last 2 years. And now you want me to just hand over hundreds of thousands of dollars? Because I'm your sister, she shrieked. Because family helps family. Or does that $9 million mean you're too good for us now? This conversation is over. I hung up. Sarah was staring at me with concern. This is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it? She had no idea how right she was. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grandpa's letter, about the specific words he'd used. You know what you did, Patricia. I gave you all chances to prove yourselves. Trust no one. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went to my office. I'd kept all of Grandpa's letters to me over the years. He was old-fashioned and preferred handwritten correspondence to emails. I started reading through them, looking for clues. Most were ordinary updates about his life, questions about my business, proud congratulations on various achievements. But then I found one from about 8 months before he died, and something in the tone was different. Dear Jake, it read, I hope this letter finds you well. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about family, legacy, and what we leave behind. I want you to know that I've always been proud of you, not just for your accomplishments, but for your character. You've never asked me for anything, never expected handouts, and you've built your success through hard work and integrity. These qualities are rare, especially in our family. I need you to promise me something. When the time comes, don't let them guilt you. Don't let them manipulate you. Stand firm in who you are. You'll understand why soon enough. With love, Grandpa Joe. My hands were shaking as I read it. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known exactly what would happen. The next morning, Sarah and I went back to Mr. Harrison's office. He walked us through the estate logistics, the timelines, the tax implications. It was overwhelming, but Sarah took notes on everything, asking smart questions I never would have thought of. At the end of the meeting, when the formalities were done, I asked, Mr. Harrison, can I ask you something off the record? Of course, he said. Did my grandfather ever talk to you about my family? About why he set things up this way? Mr. Harrison studied me for a long moment, then sighed. Joseph was a very private man, but he did share a few things. He told me he'd been conducting what he called character tests for the past year. He offered help to certain family members, made suggestions, watched how they reacted. He was very disappointed by what he saw. What kind of tests? Sarah asked. For example, he mentioned paying off credit card debt for someone and then discovering they'd immediately maxed out the cards again on luxuries. He also talked about a time when he offered a substantial loan to support a business idea and was instead pressured to just give the money outright. No accountability. My stomach dropped. Credit card debt. Pressure for handouts. It sounded exactly like Madison and Ethan. Did he ever say anything specifically about my mother? I asked quietly. Mr. Harrison hesitated. He said she'd chosen money over family once, a long time ago. He didn't elaborate, but he was bitter. I left that meeting with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Grandpa had seen something ugly in my family, and he'd tried to protect me from it. When we got home, there were 3 cars parked in front of our house. My parents, Madison and Trevor's SUV, and Ethan's beat-up sedan. Sarah groaned. They didn't even call. As soon as we walked in, I heard voices in the living room. My family had let themselves in with the spare key we'd foolishly given my parents years ago. There he is, Dad said, standing up as we entered. His tone was calm, too calm. We need to talk. You don't get to just show up uninvited and let yourselves into my house, I said. Everyone out. Now. We're not going anywhere, Mom said, planting herself on the couch like a queen on a throne. This is our family crisis too. Not until you hear us out, Madison added. She was sitting next to Mom, her eyes red and puffy. Trevor stood behind her with his arms crossed, looking like a bodyguard. Ethan was pacing near the window, his phone in his hand. We've been talking, and we've come up with a solution that's fair to everyone. A solution? Sarah said incredulously. You break into our house and call it a solution? We didn't break in. We have a key, Mom said dismissively. Now sit down, both of you. This is important. I stayed standing. You have 5 minutes. Then I'm calling the police. Dad pulled out a folder from his briefcase and set it on the coffee table. We've drafted an agreement. You keep $3 million for yourself. That's more than generous for someone your age. The remaining $6 million gets divided equally among the 5 of us. That's $2 million each for me, your mother, Madison, Ethan, and Trevor. Trevor? I laughed. Trevor isn't even blood family. Why the hell would he get anything? He's Madison's husband. They share finances, Trevor said coldly. And honestly, Jake, this is more than fair. You're the youngest. You have the least financial responsibilities, and frankly, the rest of us need this money more than you do. Need it? Sarah stepped forward. Madison, you and Trevor both have high-paying jobs. Ethan, you still live with your parents rent-free. And Robert and Patricia, you have the lake house plus your retirement accounts. Jake built his business from nothing while all of you had help from Grandpa at various points. That's not true, Ethan shouted. Grandpa never helped me with anything. Because you never did anything worth helping, I shot back. You dropped out of 2 different colleges that Grandpa paid for. You've had 4 jobs in the last 3 years. Why would he invest in someone who can't commit to anything? Ethan's face went purple. At least I didn't manipulate him on his deathbed. Enough, Dad roared. This bickering is exactly why we're in this situation. Jake, sign the agreement. We've already had it notarized. All it needs is your signature. I picked up the document and flipped through it. It was professionally drafted, probably cost them a few $1,000s to have drawn up. They'd really thought this through. Who paid for this lawyer? I asked. Silence. We pooled our resources, Mom finally said. Pooled your resources, I repeated slowly. You mean the inheritance money you just received 2 days ago? You already spent thousands of dollars on a lawyer to strong-arm me into giving you more? It's an investment, Trevor said smoothly. Sometimes you have to spend money to make money. Surely as a business owner, you understand that. I looked at each of them carefully. Dad's jaw was set in that stubborn way that meant he wasn't backing down. Mom was wringing her hands, but her eyes were calculating. Madison looked desperate, almost manic. Ethan was still pacing, rage radiating off him. And Trevor looked smug, like he'd already won. Something clicked in my mind. This wasn't spontaneous anger. This was coordinated. Planned. How long have you been working on this? I asked quietly. What? Madison blinked. This agreement. The lawyer. The united front. How long have you all been planning this? The silence that followed was deafening. We discussed it yesterday after the will reading, Mom said carefully. We had to act quickly because… Bullshit, I interrupted. You can't get a document this detailed drafted overnight. This took days, maybe weeks. Which means you knew about the will before it was read. Dad's expression didn't change, but I saw his hand twitch. Don't be ridiculous. How would we have known? That's what I'm asking you. I turned to Mr. Harrison's business card in my wallet and pulled out my phone. Maybe I should call him and ask if anyone contacted him before the reading, trying to get information. You can't prove anything, Ethan blurted out, then immediately looked like he regretted it. Sarah gasped. Oh my God, you did know. You all knew what was in the will before we went to that office. So what if we did? Madison stood up, tears streaming down her face. Does it matter? The point is, this distribution is unfair, and you need to fix it. How? I demanded. How did you find out? Grandpa told us. Mom said flatly, all pretense of emotion dropping from her voice. About 2 months before he died, he called a family meeting, without you, and told us exactly what he was planning. He said he wanted to give us a chance to prove ourselves worthy of changing his mind. My blood ran cold. He tested you, and you all failed. He set us up. Dad exploded. He dangled that money in front of us and then judged us for wanting it. What did he expect? That we'd all just pretend we didn't need financial security? What did he ask you to do? Sarah pressed. What were the tests? Madison wiped her eyes. He said if we could go 6 months without asking him for money, he'd reconsider the will. 6 months. Do you know how hard that is? Most adults go their entire lives without asking their relatives for money, I said coldly. It's called being self-sufficient. Easy for you to say, Mr. Perfect, Ethan sneered. You always were his favorite. The golden boy who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, the rest of us actually had real problems, real debts, real lives. Real lives. I stepped toward him. You live with Mom and Dad for free. You have no responsibilities. What debts could you possibly have? That's none of your business. He has a gambling problem, Mom said quietly. Online poker. He's in debt to some very dangerous people, Jake. $50,000 doesn't even cover half of what he owes. The room went silent. Ethan looked at Mom with pure betrayal. You promised you wouldn't tell him. Well, maybe he needs to know. Mom shouted. Maybe he needs to understand that this isn't about greed. It's about survival. Your brother is going to get hurt if he doesn't pay these people, Jake. Do you want that on your conscience? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How much does he owe? $120,000, Dad said grimly. We've been making payments, but we can't keep it up forever. We were counting on Grandpa's inheritance to clear it. So you've been enabling him, Sarah said. Instead of making him face consequences, you've been bailing him out. And now you want Jake to do the same. He's our son, Mom screamed. What were we supposed to do? Let them break his legs? You were supposed to get him help, I said. Therapy. Gamblers Anonymous. Not pay off his debts and teach him there are no consequences. This is exactly why Grandpa left you everything, Trevor interjected. Because you have no compassion. No understanding of what real people go through. Real people. Sarah laughed bitterly. You make $200,000 a year, Trevor. What financial crisis could you possibly have? Madison and Trevor exchanged a look, and I saw something pass between them. Fear, maybe, or shame. Tell them, Dad said. They need to know everything. We made some bad investments, Madison said quietly. Trevor's firm was working on a deal that was supposed to be a sure thing. We took out loans, used our savings, even borrowed against our house. The deal fell through. We're underwater on everything. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings. Jesus Christ, I breathed. How much? We're about $600,000 in the hole, Trevor admitted. My firm laid me off 3 months ago. I've been pretending to go to work every day so Madison wouldn't worry, but I've been at coffee shops, sending out resumes. Nobody's hiring. The $50,000 buys us maybe 2 months before we lose everything. I felt a twisted sort of sympathy, not for their situation, but for the fact that they'd been lying to each other. Then I remembered why we were having this conversation in the first place. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. Ethan has gambling debts. Madison and Trevor are facing foreclosure. What about you two? I looked at my parents. What's your excuse for wanting my inheritance? Mom and Dad exchanged a glance, and something in Mom's expression made my stomach turn. The lake house needs about $200,000 in repairs, Dad said. The roof, the foundation, electrical, it's all falling apart. We can't afford to fix it, and we can't sell it because of the will's restrictions. We're stuck with a money pit we can't maintain. That's it, I asked. That's your emergency? That's not all, Mom said, her voice barely a whisper. I have medical bills. A lot of them. The room went quiet. Sarah grabbed my hand. What kind of medical bills? I asked gently. I was diagnosed with breast cancer 18 months ago. I've been doing treatment, and it's been expensive. Very expensive. Even with insurance, we're about $150,000 in debt to the hospital. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Because you were busy with your life, your business, your perfect little marriage, she said bitterly. Because every time I tried to talk to you, you were too busy. Because Grandpa specifically told me not to burden you with my problems. That's not fair, I said. I would have helped. I would have. Would you have? Mom's eyes flashed with anger. Really? Because Grandpa told me something very interesting. He said that when I asked him for help with the medical bills, just a loan, not even a gift, you told him not to give it to me. My blood ran cold. What? I never said that. I didn't even know you'd asked him for money. He called you, Jake, 8 months ago, asked your opinion about family members who keep asking for handouts. You told him that people need to learn to solve their own problems, that enabling financial irresponsibility only makes things worse. He played me the recording of your conversation. The memory hit me like a freight train. Grandpa had called me, asked me about a hypothetical situation. Someone in the family was asking for money for what they claimed was an emergency, but they had a history of poor financial decisions. He didn't mention Mom specifically. I thought he was talking about Ethan or Madison. I didn't know he was talking about you, I said desperately. He never mentioned names. He made it sound like someone was lying about why they needed money. And you just assumed it was one of us, Madison said, her voice dripping with venom. Because perfect Jake would never think Mom needed help. You just wrote us all off as freeloaders. That's not what happened. I turned to Mom. Why didn't you come to me directly? Why go through Grandpa? Because I was ashamed, she screamed. Because I didn't want my son to see me as weak. Because your father and I have always prided ourselves on being independent, and admitting we needed help was humiliating enough without having to beg my own child for money. Tears were streaming down her face now. Real tears, not the fake ones from earlier. Dad had his arm around her, and for the first time, I saw how much older they both looked. Worn down, exhausted. So Grandpa used my words against you, I said slowly, the full picture finally coming together. He took what I said, applied it to your situation without telling me the context, and then denied you help based on my advice. He was testing all of us, Dad said quietly, including you, Jake. He wanted to see if you'd question him, if you'd ask for details, if you'd think critically instead of just agreeing with his assumptions. You failed that test too? You just didn't know it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Grandpa hadn't just been testing them. He'd been testing me too, manipulating all of us against each other. But he still left everything to you, Ethan said bitterly. Even though you failed his little test too. Because you were always his favorite, no matter what. I sank onto the couch, my mind reeling. Sarah sat beside me, her hand on my back, but I barely felt it. Everything I thought I knew about the past year was a lie. Grandpa hadn't been the wise, fair patriarch I'd imagined. He'd been playing games with all of us, setting us up to fail, creating conflict where there didn't need to be any. So what now? Trevor asked. Are you going to help us or not? I looked up at him, then at each member of my family. Mom, crying silently. Dad, looking defeated. Madison, desperate and scared. Ethan, angry and cornered. They were all waiting for me to save them, just like they'd been waiting for Grandpa to save them. And suddenly, I was furious. You know what the sickest part of all this is? I said quietly, not one of you has apologized. Not for lying. Not for breaking into my house. Not for trying to manipulate me with your sob stories. You've just spent the last hour telling me about all your problems and expecting me to fix them. What are we supposed to apologize for? Madison demanded. For having problems? For needing help? For the way you've treated me. I stood up, my voice rising. For the family dinners in the weeks before the will reading. Those weren't because you suddenly cared about me. You were buttering me up, hoping I'd share the inheritance. For the constant calls and texts demanding money before you even knew if I'd agree. For showing up at my house uninvited and trying to strong-arm me into signing away millions of dollars. We're your family, Mom sobbed. Are you? I looked at her. Because family doesn't manipulate. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't use guilt as a weapon. When was the last time any of you asked about my life? My business? My marriage? When was the last time you celebrated my successes instead of resenting them? The silence was deafening. That's what I thought, I said. You know what? Maybe Grandpa was a manipulative bastard. Maybe he did set us all up to fail. But you know what else? He was right about one thing. You all did show me exactly who you are. And I don't like what I see. So that's it. Dad's voice was cold. You're going to let your brother get beaten up by loan sharks? Let your mother's cancer go untreated? Let your sister lose her home? No, I said, and I saw hope flicker in their eyes. I'm going to help you, but on my terms, not yours. I pulled out my phone and started typing notes. Ethan, I'll pay off your gambling debts, directly to the people you owe, not to you. But you're going into an inpatient treatment program, minimum 90 days. Non-negotiable. If you refuse or relapse, you're on your own forever. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but Dad shot him a look that shut him up. Mom, I'll cover your medical bills, again, paid directly to the hospital. And I'm hiring you a patient advocate to review every charge because I guarantee they've been overcharging you. You're also getting a second opinion on your treatment plan. Mom nodded, fresh tears falling. Madison and Trevor, this one's trickier. I'll give you $100,000, not $600,000, to stop the foreclosure temporarily. But you're selling that house. Downsizing. Living within your means. Trevor, you're going to take whatever job you can get, even if it's below your previous position. Pride is expensive, and you can't afford it anymore. I'll also connect you with a financial advisor who'll help you dig out of this hole properly. $100,000 isn't enough, Trevor started. It's what you're getting, I cut him off. Take it or leave it. He glanced at Madison, who nodded reluctantly. We'll take it. And Dad, I turned to him. I'll pay for the lake house repairs, but here's the deal. You're turning it into a rental property. It'll generate income to cover its own maintenance going forward. You can use it for family vacations a few weeks a year, but the rest of the time, it earns its keep. Dad's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Now here's the part you're really not going to like, I continued. All of this help comes with conditions. First, you're all going to family therapy. Together and individually. We're going to unpack all of Grandpa's manipulation and deal with this toxic dynamic he created. That's ridiculous, Madison started. Second condition, I spoke over her. You're giving back the spare key to my house. All of you. You don't get to show up uninvited anymore. If you want to see me, you call first and ask permission like normal adults. Jake, we're your parents, Mom protested weakly. Third condition, no more guilt trips. No more, but we're family manipulation. No more keeping score of who owes what. We start fresh, with clear boundaries, or we don't have a relationship at all. I looked at each of them, waiting.